So today I'll be talking about TestStand. So I am going to go through a small demo at the end of my slides. So let me go through the slides and I'll get to the demo. In the meantime, if you have any questions, do post them in the Q&A section. We'll see if I can get to it within this session, or I'll reply to them after the session. So what I'll be going through today is calling out what's new in TestStand and Python integration in the latest release of TestStand, which happens to be 22 Q4. Before I start, let me take some time to go and acknowledge Kadambini Ganguly as Giants Are Female. She was the first, one of the first female graduates in the British Empire in India. And she was also the first female physician of South Asia to be trained in Western medicine. She passed from Calcutta Medical College, and she, along with Chandramukhi Basu, was the first female graduates in India. So a few points to make over here is she did challenge the status quo and the way girl childs and women were treated at that time. So education for women was kind of something that was not very encouraged at that time, and studying medicine was something that was looked down upon and not even imaginable for a woman. So she did challenge, and that her boldness actually paved way for future female students and medical practitioners. She also challenged the infrastructure in this medical college, which were at that time not very suitable for women. And these medical colleges had to undergo, even schools and other colleges had to undergo infrastructure change to adopt female candidates. Okay, so diving into what's new in TestStand and Python integration. So I'll be covering two releases, TestStand 2021 SP1 and TestStand 2022 Q4. But my demo will run on TestStand 22 Q4 to encompass all the changes that we have done. So first change that we have done, the capability that we have provided to Python users for TestStand is the capability to step into the Python code module and debug. For this, we have tied up with Visual Studio Code as our preferred debugging environment. So once at a breakpoint in a Python step, when the user steps into that particular Python step, TestStand would launch Visual Studio Code and load up this code module and set the breakpoint in the function. And the user would be able to use Visual Studio Code, the capabilities that are provided by Visual Studio Code to debug through the code. The next part that we have provided as enhancements to this is not just stepping into, we have added capability that if a user modifies the Python code in between execution, so the user need not have to stop the execution from TestStand, make changes to the file, save it, and then again run the TestStand execution. So what the user can do is pause the execution at TestStand side, make changes to the code, save the code, and continue the execution. And TestStand would pick up the modified Python code and load it. And it will use the modified code to execute further. So these were the two major changes that we did for Python integration with respect to modules. Further down, we have also added support for namespace. So there was this issue, or there was this limitation in TestStand and Python integration, wherein if a Python module with the same name was used in multiple steps, the modules could be located in different locations in the disk. But since the names were the same, TestStand would not be able to load the second module. So it would throw an error saying that a module with the same name is already loaded. So what we did is we now don't load the Python modules just by the file name. We load them by the namespaces. So if they are in different locations on disk and if the namespaces are different, TestStand would still be successful in loading both the files having the same name but different namespaces. Uh, these are all runtime things that are changed in TestStand Python integration. One more improvement that we did is on an edit time state, wherein in the step settings panel for Python, we have improved the information that we show in the drop downs so that users can select the components from there and not just earlier they used to see warnings, but at runtime that used to work, but then we would not show warnings and probably provide them with the proper data in the drop downs itself. Okay, cool. So let me dive into the demo and I'll walk you through these particular components. So first, let me show you how step into works. So here I have a step in Python, which is calling into a Python module and calling into a function. I'm passing a double value and I'm expecting a return value from that. So I'm expecting by the name of this step and by the name of the function that I would get a value that is double the value that I am passing. So I'm passing the value of 5 and probably I should get a value of 10. So let me run it and we'll see what happens. So 1 second, let me. So when I run, I see that the return value from the function is 7. So I know that said something not working properly. But so this would be a very simple case. But usually what would happen is you might not get the desired output and then you might think what went wrong. So before stepping two was possible, what one would have to do is load up the or open up the Python file and go to that function and figure out what the problem is. So with this step into capability, what we will do is we will step into this code and see what the parameter is going through and why we are getting return value which we don't expect. So this time what I'll do is I'll step into, and once I step into, it should load up the Python module in Visual Studio Code. It might take a few seconds to load up Visual Studio Code. And there we go. So it has loaded up the file and it has put a breakpoint in the first statement, executed statement of the function. So here we can see that we have passed param1 as 5.0, and then we see that before returning param1 is 7 because probably the code is not doing what it is supposed to do. And then we can figure out that, yeah, this is because of this particular code path the code is following, we are getting a return value which we don't expect. So this is how we can step into a Python module in Visual Studio Code from TestStand. So once we return back, the control comes back to TestStand and we can continue the execution. So next I will go into reloading the Python module without making any, without stopping the TestStand execution. So let me first unload all modules to be clear. So I'll run this. I'll not put any breakpoints. I have message pop-ups to control. So what I have is, this is the file that I'll be using, and this is the function that I'll be calling in both the steps. So let me run and show you. So at this point, I can open up my code module. I can make changes in the code module. When TestStand is still executing, and when I next call it, I see that it has picked up the new code and it has run the new code and given me a different answer. So this was without having to close the execution that was running. So this helps in situations wherein you have a lot of uh, initial setup that you need to do, and if you have to close the execution, you might have to run those initial set of initialization code every time. So this would actually prevent from that to be repeated. You can have that done once and continue to make changes to your Python code and keep running unless you make the final changes. Okay. Continuing ahead, we'll be talking about, I talked about namespaces. So if you see that these two steps, as of now, I have commented these steps because these would throw errors. Once I make the changes as to how the namespaces are evaluated, and I'll enable them and we can run them. So if you see in both the cases, the change is that both the file names are same, both are demo.py in both the steps. But the folder in which they are placed are different. So one is in folder A, the other is in folder B. But since we are not, at this point, I have not differentiated based on namespace. So if I try to run this, I would encounter an error from TestStand saying that it is not loadable because demo.py is already loaded. So if I hit run, so I get this error message which says that you cannot import in modules with the same name. So how to handle this? So what I need to do is convert these folder paths in such a way that I can make TestStand understand that these are different at a namespace level. So one simple way to use them is by packages. So if they are packages, they would probably have this init.py. And if I have these file in these folders, TestStand is able to figure out that this belongs to folder A and the module namespace is folder A.demo. And similarly, it figures out that the second one is from folder B.demo. So now when I try to run this, I will see that both the steps would actually call functions from these two separate files. Just to confirm, you can see that the one from folder A returns that this is from folder A, and similarly the one from folder B would return that this is from folder B. So we will confirm that that is what happens. So we'll collect this in return value A, and we'll see that this came from folder A and this came from folder B. So though the file names are same, since they are in two different folder locations, and TestStand was able to evaluate that they are two different namespaces, TestStand was able to run both of them together in the same sequence, in the same interpreter session. Coming to the last part of my demo, it's about the improved data that we will be showing in the step settings panel at edit time. So there are two parts to it, two major improvements. One is showing you the methods and attributes of the parent class when the child class is configured. Also showing you all inner classes within a class. So currently, first I'll show you how it is when the parser improvement is not done. So let me. So here we have a class inside a class, and let's let's say that we want to figure out what kind of classes we have, and then we see that we can only list out outer class. And similarly, for base class and child class relationship, I'll try to go quickly because we are almost out of time. So if you see, we want to call a method in a class instance, and we say that we want to call student class, we only get to see welcome student as the method. So for this, what we do is we leverage GLA. So once we install GLA, we will see the improvements. So let me quickly install GLA and then get back to TestStand. So if you see over here, it's the same configuration. Now, if I see the drop down, I can see it has two functions. So this person name, printing person name function comes from the base class of student, and welcome student is from the a function which is defined in student class. Similarly, if I go for outer classes and inner classes, here it will start listing out the inner classes, and the way it lists out inner classes is the outer class, and it separates by a period so that it is easily recognized that it is an inner class in the outer class definition. So this is all that I had for the demo. I'll close this now, and if there are any questions, I'll answer them. Thank you all.